Hello, I'm Annette, and I would like to welcome you to the Phil Sewing Virtual Club. We're glad you could join us today. We'd like to introduce you to the Sweet Pea machine embroidery designs. So today's club will feature this fun scissors case that's done in a hoop.
I think it's a beautiful case, whether you make it for yourself or to give to a friend. And the best thing is the Karen K. Buckley 4-inch scissors fits in there perfect.
This is a free downloadable design from Sweet Pea Machine Embroidery. Yes, I said free. Click the link in the description of this post to get the free embroidered scissors zipper case and simply add it to your cart. Continue shopping if you like, or check out. For this project, you'll need an embroidery machine with a 5x7-inch embroidery field for the small zipper case. The download also contains a larger size for a 7-inch by 12-inch embroidery field. If you choose to make the larger one, refer to the PDF instructions that accompany the download for the required fabric, batting, and zipper.
Before we get started, I have a few tips for you. Do not color sort the design. Do not resize the design. And do not put it into any type of editing software. The reason being is applique designs are digitized so that the machine stops at particular places. This could interfere with that, so use the design just as it comes. If you're using a silhouette or a scan and cut machine to cut your applique pieces, SVG and FCM files are included. Please refer to Sweet Pea Embroidery Designs on how to use those files. They have instructions on their website. And one last thing before we get started, I'll be with you every step of the way, so relax and have fun. I'll show you the supplies and the fabric that you need to make this project. The instructions suggest using water-soluble or tear-away stabilizer. I chose OESD Aquamesh. The Aquamesh gives good stability and it doesn't stretch if I leave it in the hoop overnight. 3 layers of stabilizer is recommended. Now for the fabric. For the top portion of the case, you'll cut one piece of fabric 3 inches by 6 inches. This piece is called Fabric A. Fabric B is the next piece below, and it is cut 5 inches by 6 inches. Fabric C is the lower portion of the front of the case. It measures 6 inches by 7 inches. And fabric D measures 7 inches by 9 inches, and it's the back of the case. You'll need one piece of fabric for lining 1, that is for the front, and it measures 6 inches by 9 inches. You'll need one piece of fabric for lining 2, and that is for the back. It measures 7 inches by 9 inches. You'll need one piece of batting called batting 1, and that is for the front. It measures 6 inches by 9 inches. And you'll need one piece of batting for batting 2. That is for the back, and it measures 7 inches by 9 inches. You'll need a few small pieces of fabric for the applique. For the very top piece, I used a piece that was 2 by 2. For the top piece of the flower, I used a piece of fabric that was 2 inches by 4 inches. For the bottom portion of the flower, a 2 inch by 2 inch piece of fabric will work just fine. And at the very point of the case, there's a small piece of fabric there that is appliqued. And 2 inch by 2 inch will work just fine there too. You will need one 6-inch piece of ribbon for the loop at the top of the case. Other supplies that you'll need is the wash-away tape, or you could use tear-away tape. You'll need a selection of thread, and don't fret over it. Any color I think would work nice on this project. You'll also need a zipper at least 5 inches long. You'll need a D-ring or any other type of clasp that you'd like to put onto the ribbon. I added KK2000 to the list. I like to use that to attach the applique fabrics. It's a temporary adhesive. It allows you to reposition if necessary. It also disappears in about 2 to 5 days. If you need it to be gone before that, just press it with a dry iron. You'll also need a tape measure or a small ruler. An applique scissors is very helpful. You'll need a fabric scissors, and this is a small trimming scissors, but it can also be used to trim the applique. You'll want what I call a rough cut scissors. This will be used to cut through the zipper later. The instructions called for chopsticks to turn the case later. I didn't have any chopsticks, so I opted to try a wooden spoon, and it really worked quite well. A little cup of water and a Q-tip is helpful in removing the wash-away tape. I'll show you that in the video later on. Also, you don't want to leave the Q-tip in the water. It will act as a wick and the whole Q-tip will get saturated. Other items that are helpful, but they're not required, is the E6000 fabric fuse, the Eversewn tweezer set, and the Dritz point turner. Take the 3 layers of stabilizer and place them in your hoop. Working with multiple layers of stabilizers, sometimes the layers like to shift just a little bit on you, so you sometimes have to work with it just a little bit more. And one last note before we get started, you may want to check your foot height in your settings. Mine is set at 1.5 and it worked fine throughout the whole project. If you find that the foot is dragging on your fabric, you'll want to raise it some. So refer to your owner's manual to do that. The key to this project is that it's broken down into steps. And if you look at your color change, we're on step 0 right now. When we begin to stitch, this will automatically change to 1. There are 40 steps to this project, and we'll just do them one at a time, so relax and have fun. If you're unable to complete the project in one setting and you need to turn your machine off, just make a note of that number. If you have, some machines now have a resume feature, and if you have that, it will automatically return to where you left off. Otherwise, you can scroll through your color sequence and get to the right step. I'm using a Schmetz size 8012 universal needle. Any color thread is fine because this will not be seen. So we'll do step 1, which is the stitch zipper placement line. So go ahead and lower your presser foot and press start. I'll speed up the stitching in the video a little bit so we can get through this a little quicker. The flourish too actually trims the jump stitches, so you'll see the hoop move back and forth like that. That is actually pulling the thread into position after the thread trim. The next step is to place the zipper on the stitch line. It's a little easier if you can pull that hoop forward. Release the locking lever and slide the hoop forward. Otherwise, you can unclip it from your embroidery arm. Place the zipper centering it on the stitch lines. The center row of teeth should line up with the center row of stitching. Also, I wanted my zipper to open from left to right, so I put the tab of the zipper to the left. I'm using the OESD wash-away tape. It has good adhesion, and the nice thing about it is if you don't get a position perfectly the first time, you can lift it up and reposition it. Two pieces of the tape is sufficient to hold it in position. If you have moved your embroidery frame forward to place that zipper in position, you want to be sure that you push it back before you begin to stitch. And of course, lower that lever. All ready? You just lower the foot and press start. So again, I will slide the hoop forward so it's easier to reach. And then I take the little cup of water and the Q-tip, and what I do is just place a little bit on, and it's not much, just a little bit on that stitch line. This will be just enough to dissolve that slightly, and it makes it much easier to remove. And then I'll use a pair of Eversewn tweezers. These are very nice. They come in a pack of 3. This particular one is rounded on the tip. It allows me to slip it under the tape and lift it, and it comes off quite nicely. Take fabric A and you fold it in half. I'm having a little trouble there. There we go. Fold it into half and you press it. And when I press on the wool mat, I take my water reservoir off. That way I don't accidentally push the steam. The wool mat, you should not use steam on it. You can use best press, but they recommend not using steam or using starch. Whenever I attach pieces of fabric like this, whether it's an applique piece or this is a section piece, I always like to use KK 2000. I never spray it near my machine, so I always take it to either a wastebasket or sometimes if it's a bigger project, I have a special box that I use for a spray box. Also, you don't want it anywhere near your threads. The KK 2000 helps hold the fabric in position. It helps eliminate the shift in the fabric. You position it with the fold of the fabric directly over the center line of the zipper and then place it into position. I will also add the tape as the instructions state, just to give it more security. The tape has good adhesion to it, so it sticks very well to the fabric. It's worth taking the time to add the extra pieces of tape because then you're sure that that fabric won't move. Step 3 is to have the machine stitch the fabric A down, and then we'll remove the tape. The process is repeated as before. We'll slide the frame forward, and then we'll use the Q-tip with water to dampen that stitch line to allow easy removal of the tape. These are the Ever-Sewn tweezers. They come in a pack of 3, and one has a pointed tip, the other is more of a flat rounded tip, and there's also a curved tip. I found the rounded tip works well for this purpose. It doesn't stick, it just gets under the tape very well. I measured 1 inch from the top of the fabric and I made a mark. I did this on the right side of the fabric and I placed several marks so I could make an even fold. I fold the edge over on the mark, which is 1 inch, so I fold it over 1 inch with wrong sides together. Then you take your batting piece number 1 and you place it onto the fabric, lining it up in the fold, and fold the flap over onto the batting. And then press with the iron. As I mentioned before, I use the KK 2000, and I'll be doing that with each section. I won't repeat that each time, but I will add KK 2000 to each piece of fabric that I lay onto this. With the right side of the fabric facing up, meet the folded edge of the fabric along the center zipper line, matching it up against the top of the fabric that's already in the hoop. Apply 3 pieces of tape to secure the fabric to the hoop. Step 4 is to stitch fabric B down. And again, we'll remove the tape by dampening it with a little bit of water. And you only need to do that where it has been stitched on. The rest will pull off fine. Now lift the bottom edge of the fabric along the stitch line there, and you'll trim that with an applique scissors. But you want to leave about 1 to 2 millimeters. 1 to 2 millimeters is just a small amount. It's not a lot. But so trim fairly close, but leave just a little bit of fabric there. I'm using my favorite pair of applique scissors. These are Gingers. I've had these for over 35 years, and they're very special to me. My dad actually had my name engraved on them for me. And only trim that bottom edge. Leave the 2 side pieces in the seams. They stay there. Step 5 is to secure the zipper. It stitches a triple stitch. After it completes the stitching, just leave the hoop in position and we'll continue to the next step. Step 6 is stitching the placement line. They refer to it as the middle section. I call it the lower section. Place fabric C on top of the hoop with the right side up. Be sure to cover all the placement lines and then stitch down. Remove the hoop from the machine and trim the fabric 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitch line. And what I'm referring to by the stitch line is the line across the top, leaving the fabric in the seams. Let me show you. I must have had too much caffeine in my coffee today as I'm really moving fast. Actually, I wanted to speed it up so you don't have to watch it at such a slow pace. There, now you can see. You just trim across that top and you leave the side pieces and the bottom piece. Those will be in the seam of the case. Step 8 is for the placement stitch for the applique piece at the bottom of the case. Now place your applique piece covering the stitch line. I use the tweezer to place the fabric. It allows me to slip it under the foot easily, and then I smooth it with the back side of the tweezer. Step 9 is to stitch the applique piece. Trim around the applique, leaving along the straight line at the bottom intact. This will be in the seam of the case. Step 10 is to stitch the placement line for the top applique. Lay the top applique piece into place, covering the stitch line. Step 11 is to stitch the top applique in place. Remove the frame from the machine and trim completely around the applique this time. Trim it to about 1 to 2 millimeters away from the stitch line. Step 12. Stitch the placement for the large applique flower. Place the fabric into the hoop, being sure to cover the placement stitch for the large flower. Step 13. Stitch the tack down for the large applique flower. As before, trim the applique fabric from around the flower. This one takes a little bit more time because of the curves. The applique scissors works fine for this, but you could also use the Karen K. Buckley, the small pointed scissors. That works well too. Step 14. Stitch the placement for the small applique flower. Lay the fabric for the small flower over the placement stitch. Step 15. Stitch the tack down for the small applique flower. Trim the applique fabric from around the complete flower. This one probably took the most time because it's being a little bit smaller in the curves, but just take your time, you'll get it. Step 16 is to stitch the embroidery stitch. It's the first stitch of the design. It's shown where the arrows are pointing to. You can also refer to the instructions. It has a step-by-step there as well. You can use the colors they used or make it your own and use whatever colors you like. It's such a pretty design. I don't think you could go wrong with any color you choose. Step 17. It's stitching. I refer to it as the upper curls in the lower section. Step 17 also stitches a small teardrop on each side. Step 18. I refer to this one as the lower curls, and I actually stitched mine the same color as the upper one, but that's your choice. Step 19 is the center of the small flower at the bottom. Step 20 is the petals of the small flower at the bottom. Step 21 is the arch right below that little flower. Step 22 is the large flower. It stitches a nice underlayment stitch followed by a really pretty satin stitch. Step 23 is a small flower. Step number 24 is the outside teardrops of the small flower. Step number 25 is what I call the upper set of wings. Step number 26 is the lower set of wings. Step number 27 is the center of the small flower. It kind of looks like an arrow. Step number 28 is the base of the flower, and here it really does a very pretty satin stitch. Step number 29 is stitching just the point of the top applique. Step number 30 is stitching the outer curlicue that's a little bit wider. Step 31 is the inner curlicue. It's the narrower one, but it also stitches the center tulip. I circled it. You can't see it because my fabric was dark and I was stitching with black. Step 32 is the outer two tulips. Step 33 is the inner set of tulips. Step number 34 are the inner teardrops of the small flower. Leave your work in the hoop, and now we'll prepare the fabric for the next step. Fold lining 1 over 1 inch with wrong sides together on one of the short edges and press it flat. Leave everything in the hoop as it is, but remove the frame from the embroidery machine. Turn the frame over so you're actually looking at the underside of the embroidery. Place lining 1 on top of the hoop with the fabric right side up and with the fold in line with the center of the zipper, which you can see through the stabilizer, and then tape it in place so it doesn't fall off when you turn the hoop back over. Turn the hoop back over so the right side of the hoop is facing up, and put it back into the machine, making sure that the back fabric that you just attached stayed attached properly. Step 35 will stitch the lining 1 to the back of the hoop. They suggested that you may want to use the same color thread you used when putting in the zipper. Place a piece of wash-away tape over the center folds of the zipper. This is to hold those down when doing the decorative stitch. Now embroider the decorative stitch. Now remove the tape. If needed, dampen it with a little bit of water to help release it. And it doesn't take much, just a little. Then the tape should be easily removed. This is a very important part of the project. Be sure to open that zipper up. You want to pull the tab so that the tab is in between the two side seams, like shown in the red circle. Fold the ribbon in half and press with the iron. Place the D-ring, split ring, or whatever type of clasp you choose onto the ribbon. The raw edge of the ribbon should cross over the border stitching at the top of the hoop. The rest of the loop should be toward the center of the hoop, and then tape it in place. Place fabric D, the backing, wrong side up in the hoop. I also suggest placing a piece of tape at the top and the bottom just to keep it in place. Place batting 2 on top of that and just kind of smooth it out there. And double check that the zipper is open. It needs to be open so we can turn the case later. Step 37, stitch the seam. Remove the hoop from the machine and turn it over so the wrong side of the hoop is facing up. Then remove the tape from the back. Place lining 2 on top of lining 1 with right sides together. Lining 2 should cover all the stitching, and then tape it in place. Turn the hoop over so the right side is up and return the hoop to the machine. Make sure none of the stabilizer or fabric has folded under the hoop. Step 38. Stitch the seam. This time it will stitch lining 2 onto the back and it will leave an opening for turning. Step 39. Stitch the seam again. This time it will do a triple stitch, reinforcing the seam. Now remove the hoop from the machine. We have completed all the stitching that needs to be done. After we've stitched the design and we remove the hoop from the machine, then we should clear the design from the machine. We do not stitch step 40. So to clear it on this machine, I just touched the home button. I used a ruler and I marked a 1/4 inch around the seam. If you got a good eye, you probably don't need to do that, but I just like to have a little more consistency. At the top where the opening is, I measured up a 1/2 inch and then went straight across through the opening a 1/2 inch up. If you see their diagram in their instructions, they left an extra little flap there, and it gives more fabric for you to turn under later when you close the seam. I used a pair of Ginger scissors to cut through, and it did a great job. This is quite a few thicknesses to cut, and it did a real nice job. Except when I go to the zipper. There I don't want to cut over the zipper with my nice Gingers. So I'll stop there, and then I use my rough cut scissors. After you have all the seams trimmed to about a 1/4 inch, you want to come back and kind of trim up around the point a little more so that when you turn it, you'll get a nice crisp point. If you trim from both sides, you can get a little bit closer, and you want to get fairly close to that seam there. To get smoother curves when you turn the case later, you'll want to cut some notches into these curved areas. Usually I like to do that with the tip of the scissors, but there's so many thicknesses that it was better to do it with the inside of the blade. It gave more leverage. It's a little confusing when you see all these layers. When you first look into it, you see just like kind of like a solid pocket. But the key is if you take a little bit of water on a Q-tip and you take that and brush that across where the zipper is, that will open up that water-soluble stabilizer, and the zipper will be kind of underneath there. Once you get that open, then you'll see what I mean. You'll be able to put your finger in and kind of wiggle that in there. There we go. In turning the case inside out through that zipper, it is a little bit of a challenge, and I call it a wrestling match. But be persistent and just stay with it. You'll be able to get it. Once you see that loop, then things start to make sense. And if you can open that zipper up as far as you can, that's helpful too. You might begin to wonder if the case is winning, but just stick with it. You can get it. Just continue to work with it. It seemed like the more I flexed the fabric, the more it loosened up too. And if you have a chopstick, that would probably work great. The wooden spoon handle worked pretty well too. I was able to kind of push that tip up, and then I was able to grab it with my fingers is how I finally was able to get this turned. Once I got a hold of the tip, I could feel it coming, and I just kind of continued to work with it. You'll feel it starting to rotate in there, and then you kind of get a hold of it there. It takes a little finagling to get the case all turned, but just keep working at it, just keep going, and it's like it's coming to life, and it's so pretty. And again, the spoon handle worked good to push out the point of the case. The edge along the bowl of the spoon worked very well to push out the side of the case. It kind of matched the same shape as the scissors case. And I used the Dritz point turner to finish out the corners of the case, and that worked real well too. There we go. It's almost completed. The only thing left to do now is to secure the lining on the inside. And that's your choice of how you like to do that. You could hand stitch it if you like. With mine, I chose to soak it in water to get rid of the aqua mesh. After that, I let it dry overnight. I turned under the little flap at the opening and secured it with the E6000. Then the upper part of the lining I secured again with the E6000 to the inside of the case. Let the E6000 dry for at least 8 hours. And the final thing to complete it is to give it a good press with the iron. That always makes it look nice.
Thank you again for joining us today. Please call to purchase any of the items in this video. Larry and I would like to thank you personally for supporting Phil Sewing. And until next time, happy sewing. Have a great day.